Last month, on Friday, July 17, White House news reporters readied themselves for an announcement. The United States had decided to lift its brief embargo on delivery of F-16 jet fighter bombers to the country which calls itself Israel. Reporters were tipped off that a formal presidential announcement could be expected shortly. The F-16 embargo had been imposed less than 6 weeks earlier in the wake of Israel's destruction of Iraq's nuclear reactor. The embargo had been so brief as to have no real effect on Israel. But as I detailed last month in AUDIO LETTER 66, it was not intended to have any real meaning. Like every other American protest against Israel in the past 33 years, the brief F-16 embargo was only for public consumption. It was a cosmetic move, purely for the sake of appearances. By July 17, the fickle mind of the American public had moved on to other things, just as it always does. And so the F-16s were about to be released to Israel. The expected announcement never came that day. Instead, there was a new shock from the Middle East. The Israeli Air Force launched all-out bombing raids on civilian targets throughout southern Lebanon. The big bridge over the Litani River was attacked, causing heavy damage and killing many people. The oil pipeline from Saudi Arabia, which all of Lebanon depended upon for gasoline and other fuels, was attacked and blown up. As reported by the BBC, but not on American television, Israeli jets bombed every single major town throughout southern Lebanon. And Beirut, poor Beirut, wave after wave of Israeli warplanes thundered over that city, which used to be the peaceful pearl of the Middle East. American-made jets with Star of David insignia rained a holocaust of devastation on heavily populated civilian communities. The pilots, many with United States and Israeli dual citizenship, were practicing genocide on the defenseless Lebanese civilians. As the smoke cleared and the moans of anguish faded away, the dimensions of Lebanon's agony horrified the world. In that one raid, some 300 Lebanese were killed, 800 more injured, and thousands left homeless. Over a 2-week period, some 450 died in southern Lebanon. During that same period, 6 Israelis were killed in alleged PLO raids. The White House, which today is a divided house, behaved as if it had been caught off base. Then the embargo on jets to Israel was extended again. The United States pretended to be upset, and Israel pretended to be hurt. Meanwhile, there were words of alarm from an unaccustomed direction. Voices who are normally raised in support of Israel were beginning to say, in effect, "What's going on here?" An example was an article in the New York Times for July 23, 1981. It described, quote, widespread distress among American Jews over the increased fighting in the Middle East, including the Israeli bombing of Beirut, unquote. According to the article, one influential Jewish leader condemned the raid as, quote, utterly without redeeming social or strategic value and an absolute violation of community standards, unquote. Another reportedly worried that actions like these represent a danger to Jews themselves. Others appear bewildered, not sure what to think. One rabbi reportedly summed it up in the words, quote, I still don't think we have all the facts about why Israel did what it did, unquote. My friends, those words are not far from the truth. The fact is that most Americans, including most American Jews, are not being given the facts. The fact is that today an interlocked military junta is controlling the military actions of both the United States and Israel. America's military policies today are not in the best interests of most Americans. In exactly the same way, Israel's military policies are not in the best interests of most Jews. More than 6 decades ago, a galaxy of prominent patriotic American Jews tried to prevent the creation of a Zionist state in Palestine. The Zionist plan to set up a new nation to be named Israel was, in their view, a cruel and tragic hoax. For one thing, in those days Zionism as a political movement encompass fewer than 5% of American Jews, and yet the small Zionist minority were claiming to speak for all Jews. Beyond that, the anti-Zionist Jews declared that the promises of the Zionists were not only false promises, but prescriptions for tragedy. Israel, said the Zionists, would be the national home for the Jews, a place of ingathering, of safety, and of rest. In reply, the anti-Zionist Jews showed that the so-called nation of Israel could never live up to Zionist claims. They showed that the nation to be named Israel could never serve as home to more than a small minority of the Jews of the world. And they predicted that the only real accomplishment of Zionist Israel would be never-ending conflict, ever-expanding bloodshed, and tragedy after tragedy. In AUDIO LETTER 49, 2 years ago, I called attention to the prophetic warnings of the anti-Zionist American Jews. Today, 2 generations later, very few Americans, Jew or otherwise, are even aware of those warnings. But it is those warnings, not the rosy promises of the Zionists, which are coming true before our eyes. As a place of ingathering for the Jews, the nation which calls itself Israel has been a hopeless failure. Today, 33 years after its founding, the entire population of Jews in Israel remains less than that of New York City alone. From 1969 to 1979, it's reported that more than 500,000 Jews have left Israel for the United States, and today over 2,500 a month are leaving for the United States. In a nation of only a few million, that is a hemorrhage of catastrophic proportions. And where are all the Zionist promises of a national home where Jews can live in tranquil security? During the past 33 years, has any other nation on earth been in conflict with its neighbors more consistently and constantly than Israel? Despite these and other facts, the Zionist image of Israel is the one which has been successfully planted in many minds. Even in major media news reports these days, it is often acknowledged that the Israeli lobby in Washington is a formidable force. Today, that power is built upon several foundations. There are 4 major groupings in the United States which can always be counted upon to support Israel in any situation. One group, of course, are the outright Zionists in America. They always echo the Israeli line, be it right or wrong. Then there are the political conservatives. Even when they may be privately irritated by specific Israeli actions, they remain supportive. They believe that come what may, Israel is America's bastion against Russia in the Middle East. An American Jewish businessman known for his support of Israel, Mr. Meyer Berger, expressed it this way on the ABC television news program Nightline for July 22, quote, "We believe that Israel is an inevitable partner of the United States. It's America's unsinkable carrier in the Middle East," unquote. The third group, a very large group, is that of the fundamentalist Christians. They have been persuaded that this is the real Israel, the reborn Israel of the Bible. This impression is one which has been fostered deliberately by the Zionists from the very beginning. The Khazar roots of modern Israel, which I detailed in AUDIO LETTER 50, are generally unknown to many fundamentalist Christians. But there is one other group, and it is the most important group of all. That group consists of what the professionals refer to as the little Jews. The small minority of self-proclaimed big Jews, that is, the active Zionist leadership here, work on the emotions of all the rest. They do their best to keep all Jews scared and therefore herded together defensively. The so-called big Jews talk incessantly about the Holocaust, making sure that fears and doubts never die. By means of emotionalism, the small Zionist minority have been able to persuade most Jews that Israel is somehow their cause. It is the Jews of America themselves who most of all are the unwitting victims of Zionism. It is they who are becoming uneasy as they watch Israel throwing off all restraints in warfare. And, my friends, it is they, the broad mass of Jews in America, who will soon begin to suffer for the actions of the Zionists.